are you really a conservative?
Yeah.
Or are they just lying to you and telling you are? All this and more on the Self-Evident Podcast. All right, welcome to the Self-Evident Podcast. You got Mike. You got Massey.
What's up?
So we have a special guest here for you guys today.
I'm excited about this.
I am too. This is going to be fun.
I will say, this is exciting because we don't normally get guests who actually hold like the weight this guy does, not physically,
Right.
sir. Please, Professor Gottfried. No, that's not what I mean. But like hold the weight of actually being involved in the political sphere the way he is and was and still probably is.
For decades.
For decades. You know? And it's just awesome because now he's going to bring a whole different perspective of what we're not seeing today. So I'm excited for this.
Especially because we get... There doesn't seem to even be an argument anymore outside of are you a Trump or are you not? You know, like
tribalism.
As far as the conservative realm. And so we're going to get into some fun stuff on that.
It's good.
Before we do that, do not forget, go to theselfevidenttruth.com.
Right now.
Right now. Just do it now.
Share the video too.
Yeah. Yes, please.
I don't think you realize you don't even have to donate, man. Just sharing, liking, all that stuff really helps the algorithm, the channel, and it gets exposure to more people that we can't reach. So the more you share it on your channels, the more we grow.
Exactly.
It's great.
That's easy enough. So I think we're ready.
Yeah, let's go.
Ready?
Let's
all
get
right,
into
we're
it.
going to do this. So we have today, and I'm going to go ahead and bring him in, Dr. Paul Gottfried. Man, a legend, sir.
You didn't intro him? You didn't have like a paragraph for him?
What is there to say? He speaks for himself.
Yeah, I guess his resume speaks for. How you doing, Professor?
I'm doing fine.
So,
As a living legend, I'm doing well.
We honor you as a living legend. Sir, you have been really a major philosopher of the conservative movement, paleo-conservative movement.
yeah, modern political thought, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And you and I were emailing back and forth last couple of days. And what I found so refreshing is you're so nuanced. And I think, and I had said this in one of my emails, I think the problem is people make generalizations because of your position, when in actuality, what you're saying is you're not necessarily making, how do I want to say it? You're not making your own generalizations. You're showing cause and effect. You're saying this led to this, and people go, oh, so you're that. Well, no, that's not what
It's kind of the tribalistic mentality today.
Yeah. So, but one of the reasons I reached out to you was there is, and it's been happening in the conservative movement for a while now, but there's been kind of this mess of, okay, what is a conservative and are you a conservative? And especially with the rise of President Trump and that populist movement kind of moving through, and you got big pushback from the moderates and what I've kind of termed squishy. I'd like for you to, as we start out, what is the state of conservatism today, right? And not the Fox News establishment, like you and I were talking about, National Review conservative. What is the state of real conservatism today?
Yeah, I think there are two conservatisms. I'm not sure that either would qualify by my historic definition as being conservatism. I would rather say I'm on the right or on the independent right than call myself a conservative, because as an historian, I understand conservatism in a different way from Sean Hannity or Laura Ingraham or the other people on Fox News. Conservatism to me really starts with the reaction against the French Revolution, maybe even earlier, in the 19th century. And there is an American brand of conservatism. There are various conservatisms in America, but I think what I understand is traditional conservatism, which is basically the landed class, a traditional patrician class, a deferential society, hierarchy, these other aspects of conservatism no longer exist. But we do have a right in the sense that we have people who are actively working against the what I call the woke left at this point, and many of them are deeply engaged in this battle. The conservative movement, I would argue, the conservative establishment is not. The conservative establishment is interested in bringing home large paychecks, which you can't avoid noticing that the people on Fox News are earning $20 or $25 million a year just to rehash Republican talking points.
Right.
That's all they're doing. Anyone who's too far to the right, whether it's, I don't know, Candace Owen, who's a black lady, she got kicked off, Michelle Malkin, right? I mean, all Carlson. I don't necessarily agree with everything they say, but as a victim of past purges going back 30 or 40 years, I know what it's like being purged by the conservative movement. And this seems to be a characteristic that is almost as common in conservatism as it was in the Communist Party, as I've argued in some of my books. But then you have a real right, and probably you guys are part of that, religious traditionalists and others who are reacting against the woke left, and find it an abomination, it's morally and religiously outrageous, and you're absolutely right. And the question is, where are you going to find your troops to fight against them? Because the left is very well mobilized and owns all the key institutions in this country. The people who are fighting against this and who are not looking to make a deal with these people, who are not going to give up on their principles, they are the real right. And I find that once you move beyond the boomer generation, and I'm so old, I'm pre-boomer, but once you move beyond the boomer generation to generation X, Y, Z, etc., these people are more open to right-wing resistance. They understand the fight that we're having, and they do not engage in happy talk, how we're winning. And if Donald Trump wins, it doesn't mean you've won the war. It means you've staved off disaster for a little while, until you can come up with a strategy for fighting an extremely powerful and perverted left, which controls, as I said, all of these institutions in our society. And, if you look to Europe or Western Europe or Canada or anywhere in the Anglosphere, it's exactly the same as what we have here, because they imitate our example. Because we really are the hegemon, the political, cultural hegemon. They imitate us. And I've argued that once we can change the dynamic in this country, it will also affect European, Canadian society and the entire Anglosphere.
Right. So just to go ahead and open it wide, what do you think that takes? Because you mentioned we've got, and I'll do this here. You've mentioned we've got kind of this you had the boomer generation, and I do feel that we've got a next generation coming up. Because one thing I've noticed on especially like X is there is this vein of young men especially who want to return to traditionalism, especially stuff of like Orthodox Church or the traditional Catholic Church, and there's this almost
rules
groaning for rules.
Like a standard, something that they can grab onto and say, okay, I'm going to follow this as a roadmap to get sanity back in my life, in my kids, that kind of stuff. Yeah, I totally get it. Right.
So what do you think it takes for the conservative movement to finally kind of do away with this Republican Party establishment, for the sake of running risk, the Sean Hannity style Republicanism? What do you think it takes to really move the right back into a position of authority or strength?
One thing it would take is getting rid of the conservative movement. I think it's actually been a hindrance. It has never won any battles. People lining their pockets, making deals with the left, expelling people on their right. Its entire history has been disgraceful, at least since the 1980s. What we need is a right. And I think these young men you're pointing to will necessarily become part of that right. And it has to be an activist right. For instance, The left will boycott anything if you don't have. If you don't come out for gender mutilation or something, genital mutilation for people changing their gender, they will demonstrate, they will close your business or do anything they want. People on the right don't do this. I mean, Sean Hannity said, I'm against boycotts. Well, let me tell him, I'm all for boycotts.
Exactly.
I think you should boycott everything. Go after the DEI people. I went to this National Conservative Conference, and I was happy to hear somebody who was in the state government of West Virginia saying, we're boycotting BlackRock because Larry Fink hates fossil fuel and also is devoting tremendous energy to pushing DEI. And we don't like this. We're taking all our pension, all of our money out of this. I'd like to see more of this. I'd like to see a very activist right, which the left is always activist.
Right.
The left is always organizing mobs, demonstrations, doing anything it wants. If the right organizes some right to life, and they're saying they're quiet, they arrest them, actually. But the right has to become more active and has to stop listening to Fox News. This is not going to save you. And I think grassroots organization is fine at this point. We don't have anything else. We do not control key institutions in this country. I also think it is important that if someone like Trump, wins, and if they're all serious about this, they should go after the public administration, which is overwhelmingly on the left in its politics at the state and national levels. There a tremendous advantage that the left has a strategic advantage in fighting any war, and a lot of those positions are open to change, and they could be changed from the top. I think there's something Heritage Foundation recommended, and they were right, and Trump sort of backed away from this. This is exactly what was done by Obama, and Democrats do this all the time. The right should do this even more thoroughly.
I think especially, and this is something we've talked about, and Massey, I want you to chime in on this. I've noticed, especially on the right, the conservative movement, all of that, there's almost this sense of, oh, well, the machine will run itself. And then 20 years, 30 years, 40 years later, we look and we're like, well, I don't understand. All of my teachers are liberal, and all of my government bureaucrats are liberal, and the whole government is just this progressive machine monolith. It's like, yes, because we didn't put ourselves in there. We didn't put ourselves into this and get active in all of this. And I think I've thought of it this way: is I think part of the hard part is with especially the individual sovereignty, self-sufficiency side of conservatism, the right, they're willing to do it on their own, and they'd rather do it on their own. Just leave me alone. And so they're not attracted to jobs of government paychecks and public assistance and all of that. They'd rather just do their own thing. But then we turn around 50 years later and it's like, I don't understand what happened.
Yeah, because the duty of responsibility takes an effort of us doing it ourselves, but also getting involved, making sure government's upholding those rights to do it. Let me do it myself instead of them getting involved.
Right.
So I'm listening to you, Professor Paul, and I'm astonished that you're saying a lot of this stuff, because this isn't major talking points on the right.
No.
They just think Trump's the savior, and I'm vehemently against having a president as a savior. Sounds more kingdom-ish. That's kind of what the conservative movement, I guess you're talking about, has turned into. But you said something really cool in a response to an email to Mike. And I want to read it. I want your response to this because I think it's so good. You said that basically the conservative movement has contributed to this process by providing weak, unimaginative opposition while working to discredit a more forceful right. A younger, independent right is now taking shape, but may lack the resources to go anywhere. We agree with you on this because that's why we provide our resources. We're more on the historian side. I do a lot of talks on history and how America was founded, all these different ideals and stuff we just don't have today. But when you're saying that, I'm in agreement with you. There is a strong conservative young base, I should say right young base. What are the resources we can do to give them? Right. Like, what do we start them on so that we can have those to train them, to disciple them, basically?
Yeah, you're asking me what can we do? Well, we need resources to train them. I've noticed the Claremont Institute has trained a lot of these people who are now on the independent right, and most of them under 30. And that's a very, very good sign. And they're very active, in trying to push back the left. We just need to do more of that stuff. I would say about, most of the resources of the conservative movement go into things that are utterly useless for our purposes. Like training people in permanent things and values, which mean to me very little, the sort of rhetoric. And sort of just getting along in society and maybe joining the Republican Party. One of the things I have noticed, and I've been very critical of this because I'm very old. I'm 82, and I've been writing, on conservatism in America and Europe for about the last 50 years, and noticing everything going down the drain. But one of the things that I've noticed is how the conservative movement in the United States is always running to negotiate with the enemy.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sort of reached for me, a culminating point when I saw Caitlyn Jenner on Fox News, and this freakish person was hailed as a conservative transgender or something, transgendered conservative. If you have to go that far, the Communist Party is well to the right, has always been well to the right of anything like this. And another problem that I have is I think this anti-communism has to come to an end. It's gone. Forget about it. The Chinese are our enemies because they're nationalists. They're ruthless nationalists, not because they're Marxist-Leninists. I can't stand listening to Trump attack Marxism and fascism. The woke left that he's fighting is neither. It's much more dangerous than communism ever was for the United States. But we have to understand the challenge that we're up against, and making, having a percentage of gay conservatives on Fox News is not going to help you.
That's right.
I find this absolutely appalling. It's not lucrative, it's appalling that you have to make these alliances. Meanwhile, people on the right, you keep dumping them because they're too far to the right. You're not going to win anything by doing this. You'll make a career for yourself, and someone will say you're nice, and they may let you onto CNN or occasionally write for the New York Times.
Paul, it's funny you're saying that. We were just talking about this in our last podcast. Isn't it crazy now how the conservative movement today is using identity politics to try to get rid of identity politics? So in other words, they're tribalizing in their own party,
right,
doing the same tactics that the left is doing, but not for the right's sake, not for values' sake, morality's sake, the nation's sake. It's to grow their base. It's to grow their finances. It's quite unique what we're seeing today. And this is the hard part. I remember when I didn't come out fully and endorse Trump in 2016. Every Republican Party in Florida, this groups that I used to kind of mingle with, shut me out because just the influence we had here in the state was very, it was big, right? And so mine was, I just don't like the idolatry of a man. I just think it's really weird that the people now are being left out, we the people, and it's now we for Trump. And it's not Trump. I'm not blaming him. I'm blaming the party and the ideals, and we keep moving farther and farther away. And you said something just recently. President Clinton now at this point would be considered a massive conservative today versus our modern right. And so when I'm hearing you say that, you said, and I want to go back to this part, the conservative movement has played a purely passive role in the radicalization of politics and culture. I love that line. And if you can expand on that, just their passivity, not just because they're ignorant. It's literally, they just said, fine, take it. We'll just go with you.
Yeah, didn't even put up a fight.
If you could expand on that a little bit, that'd be really cool.
Yeah, they generally try to stay out of the fire. And they complain that the other side is just repeating the same talking. They do exactly the same thing.
That's exactly right.
They're no different from CNN. I try to, my wife and I, if I'd be objective, we watch this CNN. It's like Fox. They're like mirror images of each other. and occasionally they exchange people. And if Fox is lucky, people from CNN or from National Public Radio, like Jennifer Griffin will appear on Fox, so it's It's a very comfortable relationship, and the attacks are largely ritualized. You know,
Right.
evil Democrats are doing, and we have to just vote for the Republican Party. Yeah. By the way, I totally agree with you about this Trump worship. I mean, I find it absolutely sickening. He really is not, a world historical figure who deserves this kind of praise. He's a deeply flawed individual. I'm not sure what his moral convictions are, or if he has any. I do support him. I send him money because I consider the Democrats so dangerous. I mean, we'll be living in a totalitarian sewer if they win.
Right.
But I do not understand the Trump worship. And occasionally I watch the interviews, or Hannity or Markovan or somebody interviews him. I am totally unimpressed with what Trump says. And he's an egomaniac. He keeps coming back to himself. He can never seem to speak in whole sentences. You know, I mean, it's he's very often.
You're awesome, man.
And then you have people who are very coherent praising him, saying this is brilliant. You know.
I think what makes it difficult for Mike and I want you to comment on this too, is when we're on our social medias trying to just do what we do, get our stuff out there, and we see the memes like, he's been the greatest president in history since Washington. It's like, wait a second, what? Let's just get rid of Coolidge. Let's just get rid of a lot of these guys, you know, like Jefferson. I mean, again, there's like all these, but that shows, I think you just said it in that response from what you're talking about today. The lack of understanding of what government's role is, right, and what the citizenry role is, and what our authority. We're giving them this delegated authority. We think that they have all authority, and that we're serving them. It's just become a constant norm now.
And this just hit me on this whole thing. And I think what especially the right has done is we forsook the power of hierarchies and structures outside of the government. So then we placed government in that top role. Well,
that's exactly
government's
right.
got to be the head. Government's got to be the hierarchy structure. And I think going back to the young men who are getting back towards the church, the cool thing is when you see a movement of the right going back towards the church, what they're really saying is government's not going to save me. Government can't be the overarching structure in my life, which is very threatening to government. But I think you've got a lot of holdovers in this whole Trump movement of no, we want a king to make the government right for us, and they'll take care of us. And that's really what it boils down to is I want somebody to take care of me. I want somebody to just protect me. And so then I can go do my little sphere of life instead of an active, no, I've got to be a part of the culture of the society of those different frameworks or hierarchies within the whole structure. You know.
Yeah, I also find the comparison of Trump to George Washington, although Clooney as I think compared Biden to George Washington. Even worse.
I can see the similarities.
I mean, he only did 2 terms. Biden stepped out too.
Washington is a man of enormous moral, religious stature. I mean,
thank you.
I don't see either in Trump or Biden. Neither one is Washington. I mean, you have to have some sense of perspective. You know,
there you go.
And Washington is a moral giant. I mean, you cannot compare these people to Washington. Maybe to Reagan. I don't know.
Maybe.
Yeah, I'm not a big Reagan fan either, I have to admit. I think the glorification of Reagan is something that this hagiography is something that has been produced by Conservatism Incorporated. And he really didn't do very much domestically. He pretty much left the left in power and passed or pushed a terrible amnesty policy. So, I mean, and he put the neoconservatives in charge of our foreign policy. So I'm not at all a Reagan. I remember the Reagan years well. I'm not a Reagan fan. And if I'm sort of like looking for a president whom I really admire, probably Eisenhower is the last one I really admire. He was an excellent president. You know, I was a kid at the time. But, you know, he did everything well. He never exceeded his power. He really had a sense of constitutional limits in terms of what he did. And I have profound respect for him as a president.
Amen.
So what is that? What do you think that's such a cool way to open this question, I think, right? What do you think the craze is about this? Like the farther we go back, it's like we're only going to 1980 now. One of the greatest presidents is Reagan, right? I was just asking you yesterday about, you know anything about Reaganomics? I've heard two sides on it. I've heard his amnesty stuff was crazy. They just put out a movie, Dennis Quaid, and it's like he's heralded it as this conservative bastion. You know, like and I don't have a position either way. I don't really know much about Reagan. I never really studied him. I'm more on the founders and 200. You know what got us to open America, lead America into. I studied a lot of World War II as well, but not so much the 80s politics. But what do you think the craze is? Like, what is it about this certain figure, Ronald Reagan, that really kind of romanticizes the people, right?
Yeah, no, I think it's that he's perceived as conservative, but also moderate, and he really doesn't make that many waves. And he fought against the evil empire, or sort of brought down the communists. But I think he also provides for the conservative establishment a kind of middle way. That he's conservative in the sense that he tries to balance budgets and reduces taxes, does things like that. But he really doesn't engage in demagogic tactics or sound like Trump, who deeply offends the media. When it came to dealing with the media, Reagan would just, joke with these people, although they disliked him profoundly. Because even then, anybody who was on the Republican side was perceived as a Nazi or treated that way by the media.
Nothing's changed.
My view is if you're looking for a really good president, probably go back to Eisenhower, but I'm not sure it's relevant to what we have now.
Right.
I'm not... looking for relevant presidents. I don't know how far back we have to go, but we're obviously living at a very critical point in history. And I'm not sure the Civil War and Lincoln work either. We're not going to invade each other and kill hundreds of thousands of people in the Civil War. It's going to work. Yeah.
I mean, I've done a lot of things on the Civil War as well, and I, reading different books on Lincoln. The one that really got me the most was this book called The Real Lincoln. Just different like views of Lincoln, and some would consider like the South. I have this whole thing on the South of like that was a federal land grab and just craziness. Like that how presidents can kind of usurp their authority and kind of do what they want to do in the name of doing good, right? Not to say that obviously slavery was not good and segregation was bad. Obviously, yes, we're all in agreement with that.
Yeah.
So I don't have anything else really. It's just more on it's just shocking to me. The more history I study, the more it repeats itself because people become illiterate to its own laws and its own morality. They just, it's a constant for me that I keep going back to. Just what was it at the time? And you can't evade quotes like Daniel Webster said in 1802. He said, "Hold on, my friends, to the Constitution and to the Republic for which it stands." And then he said something really unique after that. He said, "Miracles don't cluster, and what has happened once in 6,000 years won't happen again, may not happen again." He said, "Hold on to it, because if we don't, there will be anarchy throughout the world." And you said something kind of cool on the antithesis side at the beginning.
Right.
If we do uphold it, it actually has a ripple effect all over the world.
Absolutely. No, I mean, the United States, whatever you want to call it, controls a large empire, places like Germany, England, and so forth. And if changes occur here, it will definitely have effects elsewhere. I think our media has had a disastrous effect on, because I can understand I listen to French, German. It's pretty much the same as what you're getting here. And throughout the Anglosphere, the media are pretty much the same. They're woke, leftist. They sound just like our media. In fact, our media are more moderate than the media in Germany or Canada or other countries. But I think if changes occur here, it will have an effect on other societies that are profoundly influenced by what goes on here. I think that's what's going to happen. I think there are historical comparisons, but they're scary. And I think one has to look at the Nazis taking power and the Soviets taking power in Eastern Europe to understand what's going on here. Because I think the Democratic Party is a left-wing totalitarian party. I agree entirely with Mark Levin on that. They're very dangerous. They will cheat. They will lie. They will suppress free speech. They'll do anything. They'll put people in jail or demonstrating peacefully against abortion or so. They will destroy their enemies, and they control what is perhaps a majority of the population by now. Even though most people are not getting very much from them, they're getting beaten up, they're getting their money taken away, high food prices, but they're being lied to constantly, and they believe the lies. I know this from my own family. They believe these lies, and it's very hard to disabuse them. And what makes this, we are different from other earlier totalitarian models in two ways. Number one, we're not as brutal, physically brutal, because those are primitive. I mean, Nazi Germany is a primitive totalitarian society. They murder a lot of people, start wars. Now we have thought control, a much better developed media than Goebbels had at his disposal or Stalin had at his disposal. And we use this to brainwash people, and we do it constantly. The American media are at it 24/7. Anything you turn on, I know, on television, you're getting leftist party lines being thrown at you. Right. Everything is used for that effect. You turn on a sports event, golf or football, anything, right? The left is at work trying to manipulate you. The other thing that is different is that from earlier forms of totalitarianism is that we're not as aggressive in terms of war, doing things like that, because we can influence other societies, right? Because their media are the same as ours, so you don't have to invade them. But the left is basically a stage. It's like, I suppose Islam is in some ways similar. It's a crusading religion that is utterly ruthless in taking power and trying to control people. And they have no respect for the Bill of Rights or anything like that.
Of course.
And they will not hesitate to cheat in elections.
Right.
Even more blatantly than the Nazis did before they came to power. So the question is, what do you do to stop them? And voting for Trump, I think, is a very modest, should we say, remedy, an attempt to sort of hold them back. But we have to come up with a better strategy than that.
Right.
Go ahead.
No, do you think that, obviously, I think the modern conservative, whatever right mentality is, if we elect Trump, it's going to stave off some of the stuff. And I've been honest with conservatives and Christians. If you were just honest, what's really the issue? It's the economy. Really, people really want a stronger economy, and Trump, in some ways, offered that. In many ways, actually, we were better off under that 4 years of administration with the economy. So really, people are voting with their pocketbooks, if we're being honest. Yeah. Not so much the moral side. But you said something just now about the global side. Do you think more the invasion now is the mind, the psyop of ease? Just relax, like or in other words, not even relax, passivity. Like the more passive we can get, we're more focused on the global politic or the federal politic, not on the state, civil, or city, state, local politic. And just to preface this, our church, we had elected some of our friends who go there to the school board, and there's 4 of our church members that got elected to school board. Some of them got elected to town council, county council, which is great. And dude, sir, sorry, I just called you dude, professor. I'm so sorry. They got elected, and they removed there's 90 something books from the public school libraries full of pornographic material. Just the little changes we can make just being local. I can't trust a president to do that. He's just one person. So do you think that it's the invasion of the mental, not so much the physical anymore, but the mental side, just the psyopic one?
The draw of comfort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ease.
Yeah. The problem, of course, is you remove these disgusting books, from elementary schools, you're going to get attacked for censorship.
Yeah, that's what happened.
I speak to my grandson. I said, you like DeSantis? Oh no, he hates the human race, which means he takes these books off. But he goes to a school. He's told this, that he hates the human race. So you basically have to make changes at every level, in order to change.
That's good.
To change the situation. I think there is a certain kind of passivity at work here. Among the tactics that the left uses, which I think it learned from the Nazis, are riots. You organize riots, burn down cities, and nobody seems to care that Waltz and Kamala were supportive of burning down the city of Annapolis. It's fine. Go ahead and burn them down. And people still vote for them because they're nice people and they're fighting the patriarchy and Christian theocracy. I mean, I hear this. Yeah. So that means no difference. But also, it's okay if they burn down the city because it's not your house they're burning down.
Right.
And they probably have good reason to burn it down.
They're just angry, that's all.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds very much like people, justifying Hitler's Night of the Long Knives, that the people he killed, they probably had it coming. But I mean, it's the same mentality. It's okay if they do these things because they're fighting, these people want to impose a Christian theocracy on them, and they're fighting against this. Of course, the things they're fighting against it are total illusions. They're not even happening.
Right.
But again, these people are entirely controlled by the media and by the public educational system.
And I think you had alluded to this earlier, the state of, especially the left. I don't know that Kamala Harris has put any policies on her website yet. No. And she didn't have any policies up there. There was nothing. And when she would actually talk about some policy, it was basically taking Trump's and throwing it out there, and waffling on her other policies. And Tim Walz is just a pathological liar, from what I've seen. And I'm with you of like, I'm very concerned about these people because this has hit a whole nother level.
Truly has.
It's kind of beyond the pale where there's no more concern. It's I'll just lie to you enough that you'll believe me, you'll buy into it, and then like you said, totalitarian states these days, they can be much more subversive in how they do their work. So they don't have to execute 6 million people.
Right. Exactly.
They can throw people in prison for 5 years for waving their nation's flag. And I've watched the UK with a cause of you get people who are harming little kids and their sentences are suspended, yet then you get the British native who walked out of the pub and he's protesting a little bit and he gets 2 years. And I fear that, man, we already saw it with a J6 style thing, but then if the left gets into that kind of, it's almost like that last spot of power where, okay, now it's just naked totalitarianism. We don't have to hide behind anything anymore. And we're absolutely coming after you. And to me, this is that moment where the right, we've got to stop trying to placate everybody else.
Right.
we've got to be okay with offending.
Well, at this point, if you're a moderate, you're still getting made fun of and called names. You might as well stand on the convictions you got.
Right. And you're still going to have troubles down the road. I think some of these people think, oh, well, if I take a moderate position, I'll be okay in everybody's camp. But the problem is, no, you won't.
Can I throw just an oddball question to throw us all off here, Professor? And if you don't want to talk about it, that's cool. We can edit it. But what was Nixon like behind closed doors? I know you were a personal friend of his.
Yes, I was. No, he was highly intelligent and very articulate. Not at all the way he came across on TV. He came across as a klutz. But, in private, he was highly intelligent and very, very widely read and very likable. All the opposite of the things you were told by the mass media.
That's crazy.
Destroy him. I'm not particularly fond of his presidency. I think he actually pushed the Republican Party dangerously to the left on a whole variety of issues. And he actually began the affirmative action program, with the Philadelphia plan. But he was highly intelligent, knew a lot about foreign affairs, and it seemed by disposition very far on the right. I think the left was correct in understanding him as a man of the right, although they didn't necessarily come out in his politics. They also didn't like him, if you remember, because he started out as an anti-communist. If he had been an anti-fascist, that would have been fine, but he was an anti-communist. which even back in the 1950s, made you a marked man in the United States. During the McCarthy period, the left was pretty much in control, the pro-communist left. I mean, the things McCarthy said were true.
Right.
And he was eviscerated for it.
Yeah, well, I mean, his methods weren't very good, and he was sometimes, too freewheeling in, his accusations. But there was, in fact, widespread media sympathy for the communists. And when I went to graduate school in Yale in the mid-1960s, I must say just about all my classmates and professors were very soft on the communists and typically blamed the United States for the Cold War. And some of them even went out of their way to say that Stalin was forced to occupy Eastern Poland and the Baltic states and so forth while he was allied with Hitler, and all the people he exterminated were probably Nazi collaborators. But I mean, you heard these things all the time, and I think that the left before it became woke was very pro-communist. I think they sort of moved from one to the other. They're not the same, but the people who are behind one are similar in their personalities and in their mental makeup to the people on the other. They basically hate white middle-class Christian society. That's what they hate.
Yeah.
And they want to destroy it. And whether it's a matter of aligning with the communist or people with strange sexual habits, they'll be on both sides, on either side, depending on the historical opportunity.
I think they make good bedfellows because
no pun intended.
No pun intended, I guess. but at the bottom of it, right? At the bottom of it, what is it? It is doing away with any prohibitive structures, any boundaries, and sliding into the new, right? The new utopia where you can fulfill all of your desires, your pleasures. You can be who you want to be, that kind of thing. And communism and the whole Marxist movement, they at least align in that whole thing with, the old is bad. The old traditions are bad. All that stuff's bad. We need to get rid of that and move forward. And I think even you see this weird mix of Islam into all of that. And Islam does the same thing. They're like, yeah, I'm with you. All this old stuff is bad. What I'm not going to tell you is I'm going to crush you after I'm in control.
Yeah, but I think the people who fall for this stuff, will embrace these ideas and these alliances, are also driven by hate. I wrote this book on the politics of guilt about 20 years ago, but I've now changed that view. I think most people on the left are driven by hate. The feminists are driven by hate of men, hate for men. Black nationalism by hate for white people. The anti-Christians, they hate Christians. I mean, but they're all, many people embrace Islam, they're anti-Christian, right? So, but you see this throughout the left. And I think the notion that these people on the left are just simply misguided or they mean well, I think those are dangerous misperceptions of what drives them to be on the left.
I think that is really good.
I agree.
That unifying in their heart, it really does boil down to hatred, which is it's satanic. It is. If we're going to look at the spiritual, Satan hates. The kingdom of darkness hates. Evil hates, and you see this wave of hatred poured out in different areas, and it always attacks the traditions, the values, the pillars that hold a society together.
No, I don't have much to add to that except it's bled into the right or the conservative, I should say. Yeah, because
that's a good point.
Instead of saying, hey, I don't agree and we need to stand against the left's policies and we need to, because they are authoritarians, we put FJB stickers on there, on our trucks, F Joe Biden. And it's like you've now moved into the realm of actually having reasoned thought into emotionalism, and emotionalism is destroying us right now as a society. So,
it's so our position on that very much is like, no, we can hold standards. We can say this won't be acceptable in our society and civilization. Still love you, but we won't allow you to we won't allow you to influence and run amok, you know,
right.
because we've watched what has happened. And going back to what you've said, that whole passivity concept, it really is a go along to get along idea. And it's so destructive to me. But as we kind of close this out, what is, and usually this is what I ask our guests, what is one thought you want to leave our listeners with? Well, one thing you want them to know, one thing you want them to do, you know, and speak to the listeners and just give them a closing thought.
Yeah, I am pessimistic in the short run, but I have sort of a providential view of history, and am optimistic for the long run. I think these problems will be overcome in time. I think the left will destroy itself, and I think something like civilization will survive. And I firmly believe, I may not live to see this, but I think this is what's going to happen. One of the things is the left is driven by hate and is destructive, and it's self-destructive. So I don't think it's gonna hold on to power. I just hope it can be dealt with in, shall we say, a less bloody fashion than the Nazi or Soviet totalitarianism. Particularly Nazi was dealt with. So I think it's important, you know, that to try to win these victories, even in the short term, to organize oneself. Boycott. I mean, of course, you know they're going to complain, the left, that these people are all fascist and sexist, and you have to simply ignore that. You know, that is the official propaganda. That
truth.
Right. You have to ignore that, and just go ahead and do what is right. And but I think a lot of it is organization, strategy, and it's something very important as well. At least in the short and middle term, is trying to change the nature of government, this public administration, and reconstruct the educational. Do what you can to change the educational system. You can have private schools.
Yeah. Do you think the homeschool movement's helping that?
Well, that's good for, you know, a few evangelicals here or there, but it really is not going to save society as a whole, because public education dominates the educational system. So you're going to have to change that. The homeschooling is just I'm going to withdraw, and my kids are going to be corrupt, and that's fine. But if you want to change it on sort of the macro level, I think it's important to engage the public school system. I mean, when you say these people are elected, you know, conservatives, we have the same thing where in the town in which I live, and all the feminists scream against it, but I thank God these people are there. They're mostly fundamentalists. I'm delighted. They're a lot worse if they weren't.
We saw firsthand when we had the whole school board issue go down. We saw the shrieking that happened from the left on all of that.
And they put us on blast too.
Yeah,
because we were very
came after us personally. And it was kind of funny because the ringleader of the whole
our church
thing,
too,
she ended up getting banned from school board meetings for 2 years because she was so outrageous.
I mean, and the accusations she threw out there, and that's what we had to tell people: strengthen yourselves. You know, I was the associate pastor at our church for 5.5 years. So while we were going through all that stuff, our senior pastor was on it. We were doing nights of, like, our Wednesday nights were consumed with, you know, what are we doing in government? How are we going to get involved? What's this look like? Be constitutional. It is cool to be Christian, but if you don't know the law, you're just being a Christian in there. So we had to do constitution courses, which we offer at our church now, and just like, what does it look like for your town charter, your county charter? So I'm just encouraged by your last word, because I see the same thing. As more I study history, in the Bible too, you know, in the time of Jehoshaphat, the Lord sent a confusion among their camp, and they destroyed themselves. And that's exactly what's happening with the left right now. There's so much confusion. The left doesn't even know where to put their feet, because you got so many extremists on the left now where they're like, oh, we're going along with that now. You know, you're seeing the confusion happen. I just fear that that's happening too with the Republicans.
Yeah.
Notice
I didn't call them Republicans, because it's just the same kind of thing. But I love that optimistic view. I'm very optimistic. I know things can change. Most people say it's the end of the world. I'm saying, I think we're just getting started. So, you know, I just appreciate your view on that. You know what I mean?
Thank you.
So anyways, I'm done. I'm done ranting. Paul, Professor Paul, would you come back I was doing a book on tribalism, and I kind of stopped it because I think there's just so much to talk about with that. Would you mind coming back and addressing the tribalism topic?
No, I would very, very happy to do it as long as we find a mutually convenient time for
Yes.
our meeting.
Absolutely. So we will figure that out. So no, we want to say thank you so much, sir, for coming on with us. We deeply appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Absolutely.
So you have a great day. Okay.
You too. Right.
All right. Take care. Bye. All right. So,
dang stud. Man, that just his viewpoints. Like, again, you're talking about an 82-year-old guy who was involved in politics for over 50 years, giving his prognosis even. He's seen it all, Even for him, I did not realize, maybe because I'm just ignorant, but I didn't know the anti-communist movement was so hated by the left, and the left was in control of some of those things at the time. That's insane to me.
Right.
That just, well, I guess I could believe it because that's when the unions really started to bust out and the whole, it was earlier than that, but like, you remember the Tucker torpedo, the car that came out, the whole union came against the machine, if you will. So there was an organized machine even in the 50s. We're 70 years later and we're seeing this machine's fruit now,
And I do think, it's kind of two-pronged, which is tough because you get this over-obsession with Marxism, communism. So then everybody's a communist, everybody's a Marxist, right, left, doesn't matter. Everybody's a Marxist. But at the same time, communism, I'm a firm believer that we didn't actually win the Cold War. Soviet Union, okay, they fell, but they planted seeds of destruction early on in the U.S., right? And communism itself was planting seeds all over the U.S., and I truly do believe, like I was thinking about this last night, and this is probably a show on its own right. I was looking into Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. Did you know Kamala Harris's dad was an extreme Marxist professor at Stanford, and they actually moved to San Francisco to be a part of the communist community there. And she's got all kinds of ties to organizations and people who are flat out Chinese Party communists.
That's crazy.
Right?
We should cover that.
Stephen Phillips, the guy who's kind of backed her through her different levels, flat out, like that's his mission, is Chinese style communism. So then you look at Tim Walz. Tim Walz has been to China 30 times while he was in the military. So the question is, how did the Chinese government allow an American soldier to access their country 30 times and he never caught flack, never had any issues? That tells me...
Find out more next week.
That tells me there's something afoot.
We've got a lot to talk about on that stuff. When we all know, guys, if you're just opening your eyes to something, the extremism on the left, I loved what he said about that. They're not just communists, bro. These guys are totalitarian freaks, and they don't care about you.
Right.
They want to destroy you. They want less population to control more. That's what they want.
Yep.
They love abortion. They want to control you. They love this. They love it. This whole thing about immigration has nothing to do with population and we love these people. No. It's about control, because the population becomes more illiterate the more people you let in that don't know America. And this all goes back to, if you just read to the Exodus, it's the same thing. When Joshua, when he passed away, the next Pharaoh came in, didn't know the God that Joshua served. So then the people didn't have a leader anymore teaching them these precepts, and all of a sudden it's like they're illiterate. So then they're slaves. It's the same thing happening now. This is what's so crazy. Ecclesiastes, there's nothing new under the sun. Ecclesiastes 3. This is all the same thing. And if I wish we could put ourselves, and people get so focused on this federal election. I'm like, dude, your locals are what's changing right now. Brian, it doesn't matter. Whoever it is, your representatives, like for us, it's Brian Mast and all these guys. They listen. Yeah. We're catching their attention, right? All of us are. I'm not saying just us. I'm saying we're catching their attention, and they're wanting to talk to you. Just get them, right? So like, it's really it's your position. You have a choice of being apathetic and not involved, if that's what you so choose to do, or getting involved. But you can't have your foot kind of toe deep in it. You got to really get in and say, man, I really want to change this for my children. You know what I mean? That's really where we're at. And I admire I'm looking over here because our TV's over here. I'm sorry. We haven't done the setup yet where the TV's here for me. This is for Mike, so he can see the guy. So I'm over here looking because I'm like seeing the guy. So I apologize. But when we had Professor Paul, it just you hear his like very reasoned, strong talking points.
And
reasoned though.
He's been so misaligned because he takes very nuanced positions, and this is what I was saying at the beginning. He takes nuanced positions, and then everybody calls him a Nazi, a white nationalist, because he's pointed out how Jewish influence, and this isn't the Jewish cabal is taking over everything. What he's saying is Jews might be a very small minority, but they're very influential. They're very intelligent. They know what they're doing. So then naturally they start being able to influence greater and greater structures in an area, in a nation. And so then everybody hears that. They go, he hates the Jews. He's a white nationalist. The guy is Jewish and his family escaped the Nazi purges. I don't think he's going down the Nazi train.
Anywho. Well, we love you.
Yeah.
Comment below what you thought of this show. I loved him.
He's great.
Yeah.
I like him. So, all right. We love you guys. We hope you all have a great day.
Share.
Share it. Share it. Share it.